Well, at least he didn't do what he did when he was in office and said that the danger of global warming would mean that our shorelines would be inundated soon. And then he bought his cliffside Martha Vineyard seaside home and his directly beach home in Hawaii. So I guess he was saying climate change will go after white people, but if you're half black and your name is Obama, you can buy a place at Martha's Vineyard or on the beach at Hawaii, and the climate will make a special exemption, and the shore will not inundate it like I otherwise said it would. So when he says old men, he's creating probably, and I'm not trying to be bombastic but realistic, the ugliest and most expensive presidential library in history. He destroyed a whole historic park in Chicago and made this ugly monolith, and it's going to have his name on it, Obama. And Obama, I think, is 60 or 61. So maybe old Obama, 65. Well, 65, okay, so he's a 65 old man that wants his name on a building. How's that? And the other thing is when Hillary says white men, old white men, I mean, and then we had recently Jasmine Crockett says two Caucasians. We only had two Caucasians that voted against the resolution commemorating Charlie Kirk's life, and she can't finish a sentence without white. We have Joy Reid, Don Lemon. What I'm getting at is that we're getting to a saturation point with the word white because there's a contradiction from the left and the DEI left. On the one hand, they're bragging that 30% of the population is non-white. They talk about that all the time. And in California, I hear all the time that Hispanics are a minority majority, that 47% of the population. I don't know how they get to that number because the third generation Hispanics that I know don't really identify as Hispanics or they're intermarried. But nevertheless, they say that, and white males then in California are about 20% of the population. So why would you keep obsessing white, 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 white? And if we do live in a multiracial society, if Hillary Clinton said she's tired of a white male group, what if you said I was tired of a black male group between the ages of 19 and 39 who commit 51% of all violent crime? And I just said that all the time. People would say, well, Victor, why are you so obsessed with that particular group? I said, that's just statistics. But she doesn't even have statistics. And I could say, and I've said this on this program, every time I see a very, very affluent woman, very well-dressed, at a bi-coastal airport, and she comes to argue with me out of the blue when I'm minding my own business, I call her a stereotypical Karen. And Killleaf hits that. So would you want me to just talk about them all the time? White women over 65? No, nobody does. But they think there's an exemption on white men or white people in general, that you can use language you would use for no other people. And I'm telling you that I mentioned this before, if you look at the admissions policy at Stanford University until recently when they reinstated the SAT, I guess they were confident about it because they actually published the fact that about 21% of the students were so-called white and 9% were so-called white males. If you were a national university like they are, then that's about 35% of the population white male, but you were by design ensuring that you deliberately excluded 75% of that demographic on racial grounds and gender grounds, and they wanted to broadcast that. So I think everybody should just not self-identify. In fact, I would go farther. If all of us are listening and you see somebody that self-identifies, just say, I'm done. So if you're in a meeting and someone says, I'm a wise Latina, I'm serious, just don't participate. Or as a white man, no, you're done. You don't want to hear it. As a proud black woman, which I think we hear from Jasmine, just say, I'm done. tune out because they're tribalist. And if everybody does that, we know where the trajectory goes. The road to perdition is going to be what Hobbes called bellum omnium contra omnes, a war of everybody against everybody. We don't want that, so let's not identify anymore. And let's not do it hypocritically like Barack Obama, who has his name on a big, ugly monolith, and he is becoming an old man.
The hypocrisy of America's elite class has never been clearer. The same man who warned that rising seas will consume our coasts now owns multi-million-dollar estates on the water. In 2021 alone, Martha's Vineyard's oceanfront prices rose 35%, fueled by the very elites who preach environmental collapse while investing in beachfront property. Meanwhile, racial rhetoric has become the left's preferred tool of distraction. White is no longer a descriptor, it's a political weapon. DEI-driven hiring and admissions policies have reshaped institutions like Stanford and Google, where internal data show white male representation below 20%, despite national demographics near 35%. The result isn't equality, it's engineered resentment. A society obsessed with identity can't unite. The ancient warning still stands. Once every group defines itself by grievance, justice turns into a zero-sum game. The United States is dangerously close to that threshold.
She ran for president twice. She humiliated herself in 2008, and she lost when she had all the money and all the media and everything in 2016. She's never gotten over that, and she won't go away. She was losing finally, so she played the race card. So she was Annie Oakley Hillary that said that she was going to go to white working class bars and have Boilermakers and bowl. And then they asked her about Obama's religion, and she said, well, he says he's not a Muslim. Remember that? He says he's not a Muslim. So don't give us a lecture, Hillary. So it only applies to so-called white people when we say you're overrepresented or you're toxic or you did something. And then the final thing is it's a logical inconsistency when you have this country that the left damns and condemns as the product of white people whose toxic legacy still is the normative protocol. And then you have all these people from India and Africa and south of the border wanting to look at Ilhan Omar. She can say when she got here she was surprised how trashy it was. She can say that she thinks that the dictator Trump is worse than the dictators in Somalia. You can have Jasmine Crockett talk about white people as satanic, all of that. You can have AOC, but they never say, well, why in some cases Jasmine Crockett never says, well, how did I go up in a society that was so self-correcting that my parents were wealthy upper middle class people and I went to a $35,000 a year prep school? And Somalia, she came from Somalia and she's a congresswoman and now she's worth $20 million, Ilhan Omar. So people came here and they didn't go to Mexico to the same degree. They didn't go to the Congo. They didn't go to the Soviet Union or Russia. They didn't go to China. They came here. And they came here because these so-called white men created a society that could become multiracial, multicultural, but was imprinted with a Western civilization, European tradition, Judeo-Christian tradition that gave people freedom, economic prosperity, personal security. And that's why they came, and that's why it became what it is. And they know it. We know it because Ilhan Omar doesn't say this was a horrible place of white men, so I'm leaving. No, she says it's a horrible place of white men, and therefore that really works well on these guilty people because I guilt them all the time and play victim.
The race card has become a familiar lifeline among certain failed political figures, but that narrative runs into hard numbers. The U.S. draws far more immigrants than Mexico, China, the Soviet Union, or any African country. In 2024, over 1.1 million legal immigrants arrived, the largest group coming from India, Mexico, China, the Philippines, and the Dominican Republic. Median household incomes for immigrants from immigration from India, the Philippines, and Nigeria are now above the national average, a testament to upward opportunity not seen in supposedly oppressor nations. Meanwhile, politicians who gained their fortunes here, like Ilhan Omar and Jasmine Crockett, still denigrate the very social systems that created their rise. If America was defined by white toxicity, would so many millions be risking all to get here? The reality: while elites fixate on grievances and quotas, the world is voting with its feet that Western freedoms, legal rights, and economic opportunity still matter most. If you value honest analysis and real conversations, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and share your thoughts in the comments. What did we miss, and what should we tackle next? Your voice makes this community stronger. Let's keep pushing for the truth together.